There's this one concept in early Buddhist teachings that gets talked about a lot, but it's often really misunderstood. It's this idea of unestablished consciousness. But what if the way we usually think about it is just completely off base? Today, we're going to unravel this mystery, and we're not going to do it with dense philosophy. Nope, we're going to use the Buddha's own brilliant and honestly beautiful metaphors to get to the bottom of it.
So, this brings us right to the heart of the puzzle. It all comes down to this one tricky Pali phrase, apatistahuta vijnana. Is this so-called unestablished consciousness the absolute peak of the spiritual path? Some special state that only enlightened people get to experience? Or is it something else entirely? The common story you'll hear paints this picture of a really special, totally liberated state of mind, like a pure awareness with no object. Sounds pretty good, right? But what if the original texts are pointing to something completely different, something way more radical? To really get it, we've got to take a step back first. To crack this case, we first have to ask a more basic question. How is a new life created in the first place, according to these teachings? And how did the Buddha explain it? Well, he used this amazing simile. He compared it to painting a picture.
Okay, so first things first, every painter needs a canvas. In this metaphor, the canvas is, well, it's all the potential realms of existence. Think of it as the space where a new life can be painted, whether that's here in our vibrant, sensual world, or in a more serene world of pure form, or even in those vast, formless realms. It's the backdrop for everything.
So, who's the painter holding the brush? According to the Buddha, the painter is karma. It's our own willful actions. Every single thing we do, good or bad, is like another brushstroke. We are actively, right now, painting the scene and the circumstances of our next life onto that big canvas of existence.
All right, that's the big picture view. But now, let's zoom way in. What are the actual mechanics of how this rebirth happens? For this, the Buddhists switched metaphors, pulling another really powerful one from the natural world, planting a seed. So for a new life to even begin, you need 3 key ingredients. It's like a recipe. First, you need a field, and that field is our karma. Second, you need a seed, and that's consciousness itself. And third, you need moisture to make it all grow, and that's craving. You see, for rebirth to actually happen, that little seed of consciousness has to land in the field that our past actions have prepared for it, and then it has to be watered and nourished by our craving. If you take away any one of those 3 things, a new life just can't sprout. It's impossible.
And the logic here is really simple, right? The quality of the field is going to determine the kind of crop you get. So if your past actions were unwholesome, you've basically created a rocky, barren field for yourself, which leads to a difficult rebirth. But if your actions were wholesome, you've made this rich, fertile soil, which leads to a good one.
Okay, so these metaphors are great, but they also bring up a huge question. I mean, if consciousness is this seed that carries over from one life to the next, doesn't that just sound like a soul? Something permanent and independent? Well, the Buddha had a really, really clever way of answering this exact question.
He asks us to imagine 2 bundles of reeds. Simple, right? One of these bundles stands for consciousness. The other bundle represents what's called namarupa, which is basically a catch-all for the body and all the non-physical parts of a person, like feelings, thoughts, and perceptions. Now, here's the kicker. How do you get those 2 bundles to stand up? You can't stand them up on their own. You have to lean them against each other. They are completely mutually dependent. So if you pull that bundle of consciousness away, bam, the body and mind fall flat. And if you pull the body and mind away, consciousness just collapses.
The point here is absolutely crucial. Consciousness is not some standalone thing. It's not a soul or a self that can just float around in isolation. It's part of a process, a dependent process, and it's totally tangled up with everything else that makes us who we are. There's no ghost in the machine. Okay, so with these 3 metaphors in our back pocket, the painter, the seed, and the leaning reeds, we can finally go all the way back to our original mystery and figure out what unestablished consciousness really means.
This is where it all clicks. If you look at the original Pali, that word patishtitha means established, but in farming terms, it means planted. So apatishtitha doesn't mean a new, cool kind of unestablished consciousness. It literally means consciousness is not planted. It's not describing a new state of being for someone who's alive. It's describing the end of a process, the end of rebirth itself.
So for an enlightened person, the painter of karma finally puts down the brush for good. The farmer, now totally free from craving, no longer waters or plants that seed of consciousness in the field of a future life. The whole cycle is just broken. The process stops.
And this really leaves us with a pretty profound final thought. What is it that actually ends? It's not a self, it's not a soul, because from this point of view, one was never really there to begin with. According to this teaching, all that ends is the dependent, ongoing process of suffering itself. A really powerful idea to sit with.